He texted me out of the blue at 2 a.m., just 3 simple words. I missed you. I stared at my phone, heart doing this weird off-rhythm beat I hadn't felt in months. We hadn't spoken in so long that I almost thought the message was some sort of mistake or a prank. But no, it was from him, Eli. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to hit delete and pretend I never saw it. The other part wanted to type 1,000 questions. Why now? Why me? What made you think of me at this ridiculous hour? But mostly, I felt the old familiar ache that I thought I'd locked away somewhere deep and forgotten. Here's the thing. Eli and I didn't end on bad terms. If anything, it was too quiet. We drifted apart like two ships passing in the night, neither of us willing to make the first move to bridge the distance that grew between us over time. Life got in the way. Jobs, apartments, new faces, old routines. But that text? It brought it all rushing back in a flood. Let me rewind a bit, because you need some context. Eli and I met during this weird period when I was trying to figure out what I wanted from life. A few months after moving to the city, still bouncing between temp jobs and awkward Tinder dates that usually ended with me more confused than hopeful. He was working at the coffee shop I hit up every morning, the one right next to my office building. I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe it was the way he'd always remember my complicated order. Black coffee with a splash of oat milk, no foam, extra hot. Or how his grin felt like a quiet rebellion against the mornings that felt too gray and rushed. He wasn't the type you'd expect to catch your eye. Not the classic hot barista trope. Tall, but not ridiculously so, with messy black hair that looked like he'd just rolled out of bed but in a way that somehow worked. His eyes were this dark shade of brown that looked black in some light, and he had this calm energy that made you want to just slow down whenever you were around him. We started talking. Little conversations that turned into long ones. Talks about music, movies, the city's best late-night taco spots, which, by the way, he was surprisingly passionate about. And somewhere along the way, we fell into this rhythm where mornings weren't just about caffeine anymore. They were about seeing him, hearing his laugh, and feeling like maybe, just maybe, something good was happening. Then one day, he told me he was moving away. Just like that. No, let's see how this goes, or maybe we can make this work. He had a job offer in another state, something he couldn't pass up, and suddenly the world we'd built in those few months felt fragile, like it could shatter if I looked at it too closely. We said goodbye. Texted a little after he left, then nothing, and here we are, months later. Me, lying in bed scrolling through my phone, staring at those 3 words that hit me harder than I expected. I missed you. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I started thinking about that last night we spent together, the quiet walk through the park, the way the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and that stupid, perfect kiss that I thought I'd tucked away forever. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, a picture, a snap of him standing at the airport, suitcase in hand, that same crooked smile I'd tried not to miss but failed at. "Can we talk?" he asked. I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. The other part was terrified of what talking again might mean. Because if he missed me, did that mean he wanted something more? Or was this just a moment of loneliness? And more importantly, was I ready to find out? I stared at the screen for what felt like forever before finally typing back, "Yeah, let's talk." Almost instantly, his reply popped up. "Want to meet? Coffee? My treat." I glanced around my tiny apartment like it held the answer. It didn't, but I typed back, "Sure. When?" "Tonight? I'm in town for a couple days." I stared at the screen, heart thudding like a drumline. Tonight. Just a few hours from now. My brain scrambled to come up with an excuse, but honestly, I didn't want one. I wanted to see him. I wanted to know what this was. So I said, "Okay." "Where?" "Same coffee shop," he wrote. 8 p.m. if that works." It was a little cliche, meeting again where we first met, but it felt right, familiar. I showed up just a few minutes early, nerves buzzing like static under my skin. The city was quiet for a Thursday night, streetlights casting long shadows as I stood outside the little coffee shop. The bell above the door jingled when he walked in, and suddenly it felt like the world had turned on its axis. He looked good. Not like he was trying to impress me or anything, just his usual self, this effortless kind of cool that I'd always admired. His hair was a bit longer now, and he had a jacket slung over one shoulder, but those eyes? Same dark, steady gaze that made me feel like everything else faded away. "Hey," he said, voice low but warm. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep it casual, but my throat was tight. We ordered coffee and found a small table in the back where the lights were softer. The kind of spot where you could almost pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. For a while, we just talked about the usual stuff. Work, the city, the stupid little things that happen when you're trying to keep your life together. But beneath it all, there was this unspoken question hanging in the air. Why now? Why reach out after all this time? Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why'd you text me?" "After all this time?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair like he was trying to push back a memory. "I don't know. I guess I realized I left a lot unsaid. And maybe I missed more than just the coffee." I laughed softly, nerves loosening a bit. "You missed my terrible taste in music?" He smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "That too." We both laughed, but then he got serious. "Look, I messed up. When I left, I thought it was the right thing. New job, new city, fresh start. But it wasn't that simple. I thought I'd move on, but I kept thinking about you, about us. I felt my chest tighten. I thought about you too." He reached across the table and took my hand. It felt familiar, like an old song you forgot you loved until someone plays it again. I don't want to mess this up again, but I also don't want to rush. Can we try? See where this goes? I nodded, words failing me. I'd wanted something like this for months, but had been too scared to admit it. After coffee, we walked through the empty streets, talking about everything and nothing. It felt like picking up a conversation that had paused mid-sentence rather than starting over. The night air was cool, but with him beside me, it felt warm. As we approached my apartment building, he stopped. "Can I come up for a minute?" "Just to talk some more." I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, sure." Once inside, we settled on the couch, the city's muffled sounds humming through the windows. We talked for hours about fears and hopes, the things we'd missed, and what we wanted next. Then, out of nowhere, Eli looked at me and said, "I want to show you something." He pulled out his phone and played a song, an acoustic version of some band we both liked but hadn't listened to in ages. It was soft, raw, and somehow perfect for the moment. I turned to him, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in. His lips met mine gently, like a question, and when I kissed back, it felt like an answer. That kiss wasn't just a memory or a spark from the past. It was something real, something we both wanted to explore. He stayed late that night. We fell asleep tangled together on my couch, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe missing someone wasn't a weakness. It was the start of something new. But just as I was drifting off, Eli whispered, "Tomorrow, I have to decide if I stay or go back." "I want to stay. I want to try." I looked into his eyes, steady and hopeful, and suddenly I realized this night wasn't just about missing each other anymore. It was about choosing each other. And I was ready to choose him. Morning came faster than I expected, sunlight sneaking in through the slats of my blinds and painting golden lines across the couch where Eli was still curled up beside me. I lay there for a moment, just watching him sleep. The messy hair, the slow rise and fall of his chest, and felt this sudden rush of something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Hope. I didn't want to wake him up, but I needed to know what was going through his mind. After everything, after months of distance and silence, the decision he mentioned last night felt like a turning point. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was me, just sitting there, watching. His smile was slow, a little sleepy, but genuine. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied, careful not to sound too eager. We sat in silence for a beat before I asked the question hanging heavy between us. "Have you decided?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair again. "I have. I want to stay." Those words hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I wasn't sure if it was relief or disbelief or some wild mix of both, but I smiled so big my face hurt. "That's honestly the best thing I've heard in months." He looked a little nervous, like saying it out loud made it real. "I know it won't be easy. I'm moving back without a job lined up, and I don't even have an apartment yet, but I want to figure it out. With you." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out together." The days that followed were a flood of mess and magic all at once. Eli crashing on my couch while he apartment hunted. Late night phone calls about interview prep. Taking turns cooking dinner in my tiny kitchen, where we'd laugh at each other's cooking disasters or compete over who made the better pasta sauce. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of job hunting where Eli looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear, I took him out for a walk in the park nearby. We sat side by side on a bench, watching the city rush past, and I realized how much I'd missed this. Just being around him, sharing space, feeling like we were a team. At some point, Eli glanced over and said, "I've never done this before. Moving back for someone, I mean. It's scary." I nodded. "Yeah, it is, but it's also kind of amazing." He smiled, fingers intertwining with mine. "I don't want to mess this up." "You won't," I promised, squeezing his hand. Not alone, anyway. We fell into a routine pretty fast. Work during the day, dinners together, impromptu movie marathons on the couch. And somewhere between the piles of takeaway boxes and shared playlists, something shifted. It was subtle at first. Longer looks, that brush of a hand against mine when no one was watching, the way our conversations started to dive deeper. One night, about a month after he moved back, we were sitting on my fire escape, sharing a bottle of cheap wine and looking at the city skyline. The air was cool but not cold, the kind of night that feels like a quiet promise. Eli turned to me and said, "I've been thinking about what comes next." I looked at him, heart skipping. Yeah, I don't want to just be that guy who moved back. I want you to meet my family. I want us to plan trips, maybe get a place that's ours. I want us to be us." I smiled, the way you do when your chest feels too full to speak. I want that too. We leaned into each other, and that night felt like the start of everything we'd been too scared to admit before. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One rainy Friday, just as we were settling into a cozy evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Eli's old boss back in the other state. They were offering him a job, better pay, bigger role, everything he'd wanted before he moved back. I felt my stomach twist. Eli showed me the message with a mix of excitement and confusion. I don't know what to do. This is the kind of opportunity I couldn't ignore before, and maybe still can't. I tried to keep my voice steady. "But you want to stay, right?" He nodded. "I do. But this complicates things." For a few days, we didn't talk much. The tension was quiet but heavy, like a storm cloud that neither of us wanted to face but couldn't ignore. One night, I finally broke the silence. "Whatever you decide, I want you to be happy. I won't hold you back." He looked at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's not that simple. You're part of it now. I don't want to lose you again." I reached out and cupped his face. Then we figured it out. Together. We spent hours discussing what staying would mean, what leaving would entail, and what we both wanted from the future. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when it felt like the weight of the choice might break us. But in the end, Eli made a decision that surprised even me. He turned to me one morning, eyes clear and steady. "I'm going to turn down the job. I'm staying here, with you." I almost laughed because part of me didn't believe it, like this was some too good to be true plot twist. But the look on his face told me otherwise. I pulled him into a hug that felt like I was holding on to every ounce of hope and love I'd been saving for this moment. And just like that, the guy who said he missed me did something I'll never forget. He chose us. Not just in words, but in action. And that choice changed everything. Choosing to stay felt like a weight lifting off both our shoulders, but it didn't mean all the hard parts were behind us. Life doesn't work that way, and honestly, I wasn't about to pretend everything suddenly became this perfect romantic movie scene. Eli had turned down the job, yes, but now he needed to find something here, and fast. We both knew my temp gig wasn't going to cut it forever, and neither of us wanted to lean too heavily on each other. So we started the adulting together phase, which involved a lot of job applications, interviews, and way too many late-night Google searches about how to adult when you have no idea what you're doing. One Saturday morning, after a particularly brutal job interview that left Eli feeling like he'd just been chewed up and spit out, we found ourselves at the local diner, nursing black coffee and scrambled eggs. His usual spark was dim, and I hated seeing him like that. "You okay?" I asked, watching him poke at his food like it was a plate of regret. He sighed. "I don't know. I thought turning down that job would make things easier, but it's just different challenges. I'm scared I made the wrong choice." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Hey, you made the choice that felt right. That's braver than most people I know." He looked up, eyes meeting mine, and for a second, we just sat there. Two people who'd been through too much to pretend this was easy, but still willing to try. "Thanks," he said quietly. That afternoon, we wandered through a nearby park, the kind with twisting paths and trees that were just starting to turn gold with the season. We talked about everything, the small wins, the setbacks, the fear that sometimes crept in when we thought about the future. Then, out of nowhere, Eli stopped walking and pulled me close. His hands found my face, and his eyes searched mine like he was trying to memorize everything. "I don't want to lose you again," he whispered. I smiled, heart pounding in that ridiculous, hopeful way. "You won't." We kissed there on the leaf-strewn path, the kind of kiss that makes you forget the uncertainty outside, if only for a moment. But reality came crashing back before long. A few weeks later, during one of my own job interviews, I got a call that my contract wasn't going to be renewed. It was the first real punch to the gut since all this started. I didn't want to tell Eli right away. I didn't want to add to his stress. But secrets don't last long in a small apartment when your partner keeps asking if something's off. So one night, I sat him down and spilled it all out. "I lost the contract," I said, voice barely above a whisper. He blinked, then gave me this steady look that made me want to cry. "Okay, we'll figure it out. Together." It's funny how the phrase "together" became our anchor, the thing that kept us from spiraling every time life slammed a new obstacle in front of us. We started brainstorming. I took on some freelance gigs, and Eli picked up a part-time job at the same coffee shop where we first met. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him something to do besides stressing about the future. One evening, after closing time, we sat on the coffee shop's worn leather couch, exhausted but laughing over some dumb joke from earlier. "You ever think about how weird it is?" I asked. "How this all started here, and now we're back." He grinned. "Yeah, feels like full circle." I reached for his hand again, and he squeezed back. That night, as we walked home under streetlights flickering against wet pavement, I realized how much I loved this messy, imperfect life with him. A few days later, Eli surprised me. He pulled me into a quiet corner of a local bookstore, a place we'd started visiting since he moved back, and pulled out a small notebook. "I've been writing," he confessed. "Cheeks a little pink. Thought maybe I could turn some of this into something real. Stories, poems, I don't know yet." I looked at him, feeling this swell of pride. "That's amazing." He shrugged, nervous but hopeful. "Feels like a start." And that's what it was. Both of us starting over, together, with nothing guaranteed, except that we wanted to keep choosing each other. Of course, it wasn't all easy moments and heartfelt talks. There were nights when we argued about money, or when the stress of uncertainty got too heavy. There were awkward dinners with his family, who weren't quite sure what to make of this rekindled thing, and days when I wondered if I was enough. But there was also this quiet strength in us, the kind that comes from weathering the storm side by side. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Eli kissed me like he meant it, deep and sure. When he pulled back, he whispered, "Thank you for sticking around." I smiled, heart full. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes love isn't just about the grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up over and over again, because the thing Eli did, the thing I'll never forget, wasn't just saying he missed me. It was choosing to stay, choosing me. And that choice? It's the one I'll carry with me, always. Months passed, and with each one, Eli and I settled deeper into the rhythm we were building together. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was ours. The kind of imperfect that felt like home. His writing started to take shape, little by little. He'd spend evenings scribbling in that battered notebook, lips pressed in concentration, sometimes muttering sentences under his breath. I could see the passion in his eyes when he talked about his stories, how they were slowly becoming more than just words on a page. One night, he pulled me into our cramped kitchen, waving the notebook like a trophy. "I got into a local writer's workshop," he said, grinning like a kid who just got the best birthday present ever. "First meetings next week." I laughed and pulled him into a hug. "That's amazing. I'm proud of you." He squeezed me back, eyes more serious now. "Thanks for pushing me to keep trying. I don't know if I'd have done it without you." I shook my head. "You had it in you all along." Watching him chase something meaningful felt like a kind of magic. It reminded me why I'd fallen for him in the first place, the quiet strength beneath that casual, "I've got this" attitude. Meanwhile, I was finally starting to get my own footing again. Freelance gigs turned into steady projects, and before I knew it, I'd landed a part-time position at a small marketing firm. It wasn't a dream job, but it was a start. One evening after a long day at work, I came home to find Eli sprawled across the couch, reading. The soft glow of the lamp made his face look peaceful, and I thought about how lucky I was that this was my life now. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down beside him, and nudged his shoulder. "You're the reason I'm still sane." He smiled, closed the book, and leaned into me. "Right back at you." We talked late into the night about everything and nothing. The usual mix of jokes, dreams, and the occasional deep dive into what scared us. It felt like we were carving out our space in the world, one conversation at a time. But just when things started feeling steady, something unexpected happened. Eli got a call from a publisher interested in his writing. They wanted to see more, maybe even consider a small book deal. I remember how his hands shook as he told me, voice barely above a whisper. This could change everything. I just held him tight, because I was scared too. Scared that this new chapter might pull him away again, or that the pressure would crush the fragile balance we'd worked so hard to build. But Eli surprised me. Instead of pulling away, he leaned into it. Late nights turned into early mornings as he wrote with a fierce determination, and I did whatever I could to support him, making coffee, reading drafts, offering my sometimes questionable feedback. One weekend, we took a trip out of the city just to escape the noise and clear our heads. We found a little cabin by a lake, and for a few days it was just us and the quiet. One evening, sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, Eli looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "I can't believe how far we've come." I laughed, brushing a stray curl out of his face. "Neither can I, but I'm glad it's with you." He reached over and took my hand, holding it like he never wanted to let go. That trip felt like a turning point. Not because of any grand gesture, but because it was the first time I realized how deeply I wanted to build a life with him, a life that couldn't be undone by distance, fear, or uncertainty. Back in the city, we faced new challenges. The publishing world was tough, and Eli's confidence wavered at times. There were nights when he questioned if he was good enough, if his words mattered. And during those moments, I tried to be his anchor, reminding him why I believed in him. One particular night stands out. Eli had just gotten a rejection letter from a magazine he'd submitted a story to, and he was curled up on the couch, shoulders hunched. I sat beside him, careful not to crowd. "It's okay to be disappointed," I said softly, "but don't let it define you." He sighed. "It's just hard. I want this so badly. I don't want to fail again." I took his hand, fingers intertwining. "You won't. Not as long as you don't give up." He looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears, and something shifted between us, this quiet understanding that we were in this together, no matter what. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. Full of messy moments, honest talks, and small victories that felt huge. One evening, after a home-cooked dinner that ended in too much wine and laughter, Eli pulled me close and whispered, "Thank you for sticking with me." I smiled against his neck. Always. And I meant it, because the thing that started with a simple text, "I missed you," had grown into a love that surprised me every day. A love built on choices, on showing up, on trusting someone enough to stay. He didn't just say he missed me. He showed me how far missing someone could take you. And that's a story I'll never forget. One quiet Sunday afternoon, a few months after Eli's writing started gaining attention, we found ourselves sitting on the couch, the soft hum of the city outside our window like a steady heartbeat. He was curled up next to me, notebook resting on his lap, eyes bright but tired from the late nights. I reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, feeling that familiar warmth settle in my chest. "You know," he said, voice soft, "I never thought missing someone could lead to all this." I smiled, fingers tracing gentle circles on his arm. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it did." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, savoring the moment. No rush, no pressure, just the two of us. It hit me then how far we'd come, how the shaky, uncertain beginnings had grown into something steady and real. Not perfect, but ours. Later that evening, Eli surprised me by pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. "I wrote something for you," he said, cheeks flushed with that shy smile I'd come to adore. He read quietly, words that carried everything he hadn't always said aloud. The gratitude, the hope, the quiet promise to keep choosing me over and over again. When he finished, I felt tears prick at the edge of my eyes, not because it was too much, but because it was enough. Because this was love in its truest form. Patient, persistent, and beautifully simple. I pulled him close, and this time, when we kissed, it wasn't a question or a spark. It was an answer. A beginning and a promise wrapped into one. That night, as we lay tangled together, I realized something important. Life isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about the choices we make, the people we hold on to, and the courage it takes to stay. Eli chose to stay. I chose to stay. And every day since, we've been choosing each other. A little more, a little deeper. And honestly, that's a kind of love I won't ever forget.